Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Creative Confidence Summit. Today we are here with Elise Benin, and I'm really looking forward to introduce you to her. Elise is the author of 7 business books for the creatively self-employed. She's a national speaker and founder of marketing-mentor.com, through which she works one-on-one to teach the skills most creatives never learned: marketing and pricing. So today we are going to talk about the very important strategies and tools that you can use to really leverage your creativity to grow your business and to be successful as a business person while being creative. So thank you so much for being here with us, Elise.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, so I know that you've been doing this for quite a while. You've been helping creatives with their business. So I know that you're very well aware of what are kind of the main challenges in terms of growing a creative business. So if you could kind of list the main challenges that you've seen most creatives face in the process of building a sustainable business and really growing it and scaling it in a way that's sustainable.
And maybe we should start by having a caveat whereby we don't only talk about growing a creative business, because really this is for growing a creative career. Even if you are currently employed full-time or part-time, to me, the reality is that there is no such thing as job security anymore. And people are fired willy-nilly or move and have to find another job. And so some of the skills that I teach, networking, for example, cultivating relationships with people who can help you and whom you can also help. These are important whether you're building a business or just a career.
Right. That's such a good point. Thank you so much for bringing it up. That really is one of kind of my main missions personally, and I know for the summit as well, is really how do we provide tools for people to really thrive in this kind of new, changing economic landscape, which no longer really affords that kind of job stability. So it's requiring a lot of us to really step up in different ways. So in the process of helping people to create that career, what have you found are kind of the greatest challenges in that process?
So I bring up networking first because cultivating relationships seems to be a little challenging for people who often consider themselves to be introverts. And a lot of creative people basically say, let me just do my work and don't make me talk about it. My work should speak for itself. All of these kind of cliches that are very common. And maybe that used to be fine when there wasn't as much competition and there wasn't the internet, when your competition wasn't a click away. But now it is. And so cultivating relationships and staying in touch with people and following up with people and knowing what to say when you follow up, or knowing that you don't actually even have to have something to say because following up is the reason in and of itself. And so how do you do it in a genuine way, in a generous way, in a way that draws people to you and makes them want you to stay in touch, essentially.
Right. So I'm curious if you could draw, because I noticed that you talked about cultivating relationships and you don't necessarily say networking. So I'm curious if you can just maybe perhaps talk about the distinction between the two, if you do perceive a distinction, and if you do, what would you say are kind of like the best practices to really cultivate relationships in a way that is authentic and in a way that's effective and powerful?
So I don't actually make a distinction between the two, but I try not to use the word networking because it gets a bad rap and it already has negative connotations that go along with it. So I do try to use cultivating relationships also because really that's what it is. It's finding people that you connect with and then keeping the conversation going, because you never know who will need what at what time or how they may be able to help you or how you may be able to help them. So if you only go to your network when you need something, then you're not perceived as a very generous person, and people won't want to help you in turn. And so I really think one of the essential main skills is to focus your attention on finding the right people, the people who you do have something to offer to, and then going out of your way and taking the time to cultivate those relationships over time. And so you asked about strategies, and I mentioned follow-up before, because I do think that follow-up, meaning after you've had an initial connection, keeping the conversation going in whatever way you can, whether it's on social media or through regular old-fashioned mail, like by sending a handwritten note or a sample of your work or anything like that. But you'd be surprised how many people never follow up. That's my experience. I don't know if that's your experience.
Right.
Do you notice
Right.
that?
I know for me, it's hard to follow up.
Why? What's so hard?
So, which is the next question that I was going to ask you, which is, I think nowadays there's kind of so many people. I mean, I know at least for me on a personal level, so many people that I'm aware of, physically, people that I see, but then also, there's kind of these, I look at them as circles, right? So it's like the circle of people that I see physically, the circle of people that I see on social media, the circle of people that I see that I know, but maybe I don't even see them on social media or anywhere. And then the circle of people that maybe I don't know, but I do know on social media, but not physically. So I mean, we live in a world where it's so easy to connect with anyone, right? And in some ways, it's kind of like we've increased the numbers of friends to the thousands, right? Speaking in terms of social media kind of platforms. How do you really keep in touch with so many people, right? And how do you choose who do I keep in touch with, right? So that it's manageable. Or maybe there are ways to keep in touch with kind of thousands of people in your network or in.
Well, I'll just speak for myself, and I am growing a business in which I help people keep in touch. So I have to practice what I preach, obviously. And I find that email is the most effective tool. So I have been sending out for, 15 years, I think now, an email. It's not quite a newsletter, but I call it a newsletter. It's called Quick Tips from Marketing Mentor. And every other week, I come up with a really short, pithy, useful, relevant tip for my market, and I know my market and I know what they're struggling with, and so I come up with something that they will want to read at some point. I don't expect them to read it the minute it hits their inbox, but they know that every other week they're going to get something from me, which means I'm still here, and it gives them a little bit more drip by drip information about what I do and how I do it. And I send that actually to thousands of people, and it's a slow burn. It's cumulative, and people who've been on my list for years and years finally, eventually, sometimes come to take advantage of a free session that I offer so we can have an actual conversation. And those are the people that I stay in touch with on a one-to-one basis. So I think there are different ways of staying in touch, but I do think that almost everyone can create some kind of ongoing, maybe monthly or quarterly message that they can send out to everyone that they want to stay top of mind with.
Right. And so, so as you started to share that, I was thinking, so those are kind of the, prospective clients or, kind of, so I'm curious to hear if there's, when you say cultivating relationships, for whatever reason, what I was thinking of was kind of, the traditional networking where you're either interacting with kind of peers that are doing something similar to you or in the same space, or kind of mentors. So I'm curious, with those groups of people, do you have other ways of interacting with them?
No,
or
actually,
everyone's kind of, you send them all the same email?
right. Well, and it's not that I send them all the same email. The message I want to communicate is strategically designed so that people understand what I do and what I have to offer. And the byproduct of it, which I find kind of interesting, is that they start to feel like they know me because they hear
Right.
on a very regular
Right.
basis. And that engenders trust. So there are thousands of people out there who already trust me, and I have no idea who they are. But when they're ready, they will either reach out to me or pass my name along or think of me or go find my message in their inbox or go look me up or think they remember my name, but it was a weird one. So how do you spell it again? You know, like that's the point. And so if you're a mentor or a referral source or a prospect, I mean, sometimes the same people go from one category to the other. So it's not up to me to categorize them, right? I
Right.
just want to stay in touch with as many people as I possibly can.
Right. So that's a really great point that you bring up, which is that you are building trust as you're sharing about what you're doing and as you're updating others. And you may not even be aware, that this other person is experiencing trust with you, right? But just really the importance of having a community or kind of group of people that you are updating and sort of sharing information with on a regular basis in some ways, because there's so much overload of information, so that they won't forget about you, that you'll kind of be on their mind.
And actually, I know it sounds like you have a question there, but let me add something to that, because you asked about challenges with this. And I find one of the challenges people face is that for some reason, even though when they do this, they are engendering trust, they assume the negative. They assume that nobody wants to hear from me. They assume, and this is where confidence comes in, or lack thereof, right? They assume that what they have to say isn't going to be of interest or of value to anyone. And I mean, how can you make that assumption in such a broad generalization anyway? But I find that what gets in people's way is assumptions that they make about the world out there that is hardly ever true, maybe never true. And if it were true, you wouldn't know it anyway. So it's better to err on the side of the positive and be generous and offer what you have and trust yourself that the people who will value it, and the rest will just delete it. And that's fine. I don't care.
Right. So I'm curious, I'm going to sort of take a few steps front and back. So I know that you work with helping people kind of define their audience and their message. So what I'm curious about is, even before you've really sort of defined your message and audience, how do you suggest that people sort of send those updates or emails? How to focus all of the information, or what kind of focus to have before someone's kind of really maybe figured out or narrowed on their message?
It's very tricky, and that's the catch-22 for sure, because what I always start with a prospect or a client is, who are you speaking to? If you don't know who you're speaking to, it's very difficult to communicate anything specific. And if that's the case, if you're not there yet, then you have to focus inward and come up with, all right, what's the most important thing to me? Or what is the most strategically interesting thing to me? Meaning, if I want more of a certain type of response, then what message do I need to put out there in order to get that response?
Right.
Right. So I think that it's best to narrow down as much as possible your idea of who you're speaking to. I think part of the problem is most people want to be everything to everyone. They don't want to alienate anyone. They don't want to leave anyone out. And to me, that's just not reality. You have to know how to say no and weed out what is not relevant to you or what is not of interest to you. And focus is the key.
So that's a really good point, that, nowadays there's people that are, maybe have 3 different businesses, or, have a full-time job and then 2 passion projects, and then they're wanting to build a second business. And so this idea of focus is so important. How do you suggest that people find that focus and really learn to say no? And if you could maybe give us an example of someone that you've worked with that, maybe had 3 different passion projects or businesses, and how they sort of chose to define and narrow their message and their audience.
So first of all, I'll say 2 things so I don't forget them. and then I'll come back. So the first one is that focus doesn't necessarily mean one thing. And the other thing is the difference between what you need and what you want.
Mm.
So focus can be in the narrowing process, which does take time, could mean that you have so many what you think are wonderful ideas, but you're going to have to choose what's actually possible to do. And so I would start by choosing, 3 is a number I like a lot. I advise people not to choose more than 3 of anything. And I think part of why people don't limit things to 3 is because they're afraid they're going to lose, the 4, 5, 6, and 7 other
Right.
ones. But you really do have to let go of something.
Right.
And so, we start by narrowing. And so I would say, narrow to 3, narrow to 2 if you can, and then eventually narrow to one thing that you're really focused on.
Right.
And then how do you choose that one thing? It's the difference between what you need and what you want. And most people are thinking only about what they want, not so much about what they need. And when I say need, I mean, is your goal to make money? Because if it is, then you need to focus on the thing that will make you the most money, probably the quickest.
Okay.
But if you have plenty of money, or if you're a kept woman or man, then you don't have to think about that need. And if your need then is to be creatively satisfied, then you focus on the things that will achieve that goal. But you have to know what you're aiming for. And usually I find that people confuse need and want, and prefer to focus on what they want as opposed to what they need, and then of course end up not getting what they need.
Right. And so then you also, in this conversation, which I think is it's a really fascinating topic to talk about, because I do notice that sometimes it's like people don't necessarily distinguish, and it's important to even distinguish between the two. And then you brought up the idea that, we can find out, the need. If there's a need, then there's a way to figure out what will make the most money.
Mm-hmm.
But then you said, then there's also the aspect about, the creative fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you find that kind of the sweet spot of that intersection of, getting the needs met, of, finding the way to really make the most money, but out of something that also feels the most creatively satisfying? So I mean, in some ways it's kind of the intersection of the want and the need, right? The desire to find creative fulfillment, and then also the need to pay bills. So how do you kind of bring the two together and really find that sweet spot between the two?
I would say, first of all, that it may not be in the same service or passion project. Like, you may have to have one focus on something that is getting you what you need, and the other focus on what's getting you what you want. Right? So when I work with someone, usually they need to make money first. So we start with, what is the low-hanging fruit? What could get some bread and butter projects in here for you quickly, so that you can get that ball in the air? I often think of it as juggling. Get that ball in the air, get the work in, so that you can then turn your attention to the thing that will probably take longer and not necessarily be as lucrative, but you can then turn your time and spend your time on it. Because usually, the things, actually I do have an example. There was a client yesterday who was distinguishing between churn and burn projects and creatively gratifying projects. And so I said, well, the content that you create for your marketing should be aspirational. It should be going after the work that you want more of. And your targeted marketing activities that you're going to do every single day should be to make sure that the bread and butter is coming in, so that little by little, as you go into the future, you will be setting the foundation for what will be creatively satisfying, but may not be the most lucrative.
Right.
That makes sense?
Yeah. So it's really kind of looking to having two approaches, diversifying the approach. So So in terms of really helping people find that bread and butter quickly, let's say they have 3 or 4 different ideas for what they want to do, but they really still need to pay the bill so that they can also just focus on those kind of creative projects or creative avenues. What's your suggestion for kind of doing that in the most effective way possible, of really finding out if, I have these 3 different ideas for some sort of a creative business. What's your suggestion in terms of starting, finding out what's going to yield the most money? How do I find the customers, and kind of that whole process, if you could sort of guide us through that.
Sure. I mean, the first thing is, where are you going to have the easiest access? So that means people who you already know, connections that you already have, maybe relationships you've already cultivated that will get you to your goal quicker. Because if you don't have existing relationships to build on, that's the thing that takes so much time.
Right.
Is that you have to get some mental real estate and someone else's attention out of the blue. That's really hard to do. It's possible, but it's hard. So the shortcut to the bread and butter work is building on existing connections. And then from there, are there places you can go? Are there samples you can show? Are there existing materials that you won't have to, take your time to create, that again will be a shortcut to getting that bread and butter work?
Right. And so I'm curious, are you talking about this inside of the online space or kind of in the analog space?
Both.
Okay.
For example, if you, let's see, I'm thinking of a photographer client, for example, who does a lot of bar mitzvah photography.
Okay.
I'm sorry, bar and bat mitzvah photography. And so I'm advising her to go in the analog world, in the real world, to these showcases that are put on where the clients come and they're looking for you. So if she can meet those people in person and make an introduction and begin a relationship and then follow up and cultivate that relationship, she's in a much better position than if she were to find someone online or they were to find her online, for example. Right? So I think in the analog world, whenever possible, is the best way to start these relationships. But all of this, accessing people and sharing examples and showing portfolio, of course, that happens online as well.
Right. I'm curious what your thoughts are in terms of, because there's so much is happening in the online space, when, advising creatives in the process of starting a business, whether, you suggest kind of going online, analog first, or what are your thoughts in terms of best ways to grow a business, especially in the early stages? Whether the focus be analog or digital, or how to how the two sort of integrate and come together.
They do integrate and come together, but I would always, if possible, start in the real world with the real people that you know, and maybe that means connecting with them on LinkedIn or touching base with them on LinkedIn, because that's a professional database, basically.
Right.
And then sending some examples of your work, or better, finding out if they are even in a position to need whatever your services are or whatever your work is. So that's kind of going back to one of your first questions, which had to do with the challenges that people face. I do find that there's a difference between focusing inward and focusing outward. And focusing outward is a curious perspective. It's an exploratory kind of research perspective. And that's a much better approach than, here's what I do, do you need me, or do you have anything for me? So the curious approach is, what are you working on these days? And what resources are you using? And what challenges are you facing? And what's missing from your creative services suite? Or, anything that will get someone talking about their pain. Right. And ideally, you are the cure to their pain. So you're looking for people who have the pain that you can cure.
Right. And so in the work that you do to help people define the audience,
Mm-hmm.
Is that the process of really defining the audience and the client base, is that something that happens just in the outreach where you just start reaching out to as many people as possible, or what does that client definition process look like?
It does start with actual research. So going to places where everyone is in the same room is the most efficient way of getting answers to those questions. And that kind of goes back to the idea of networking also, but also cultivating relationships, because people want to help. So if you go to an event like the local chapter of the PRSA, the Public Relations Society of America, this is this photographer that I was talking about. She wants to do executive portraits. So I said, go to the PRSA and get in a room, and you're not going to sell yourself. You're not going to try to convince anyone to hire you. You're going to do your research, and you're going to go with your questions, and you're going to ask, who does this? Are you using iPhones for executive portraits? And if so, why? And if not, why not? And, really engage people in a conversation about the services that you offer, but not about you offering those services.
Right. So you just kind of were mentioning the photographer, and I'm thinking of a client that I have right now she's her bread and butter comes from other sources where she has this kind of freelance writing work. But what she really wants to do is really to make a living as a photographer.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's interesting, we've had some conversations where she doesn't really know where or how to do this, right? So I'm curious in those cases where someone wants to have or build some kind of creative business, but they really don't, they simply don't kind of see the way. How do you suggest that, they even begin the process of figuring that out?
Okay, at the risk of promoting myself, I would say go to my website and read my books and sign up for my free consultation. But if you're not going to do that, and even if you do that, I mean, it's such a big question. And I think part of the problem is that creative people are not trained for this. Like in my bio, that was one of the things that you read, right? This idea that creative people just have not had the training in business topics. So go get the training is basically the first response. And then, if I were to teach someone how to do this, and this is what I do all day long, I would say you start with defining the market that you are best suited to serve. And, again, with this photographer that I'm talking about, she wants to do mitzvahs. She wants to do executive portraits. She wants to do nudes. She's got all different areas that she wants to focus on. And what I've been trying to help her decide is what do you need? Do you need money? Do you need creative gratification? Do you need something else? Do you need variety? And then based on that, focus on the first market. And then the first step is go find out if they actually think they need you, and what is the competitive landscape, and who else is offering that, and what does your website need to look like, and where do you find those people? And so it is a research project to begin, is I guess what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, in business school, they would call this market research.
Yeah, basically,
right.
Yeah.
So and I know you mentioned the difference between want and need earlier. Mm-hmm. So when someone there's something that they want, how do they actually find out if there's a need for it?
It's really just asking.
Just going up to people. And you suggest the analog versus digital style, even if it's a digital-based business.
I do, yeah, because it's harder for people to agree to make the time to give you their attention to answer your questions if they don't know you, first of all, and if you're not standing right in front of them, basically.
Right.
So I just think it's more efficient to do it that way.
Great. So just to kind of kind of complete the conversation, I just wanted to go back to an earlier point that you made, mm-hmm. which was about kind of the shifting landscape around us, the fact that, the job stability is not the same as it used to be. What are some of your kind of key guidance or suggestions, advice, words of wisdom for people to really prepare for that, for that changing landscape? What would you kind of suggest individuals so that they can really be prepared to deal with whatever kind of economic or work landscape shifts take place?
I think the first thing is that you have to be ready to evolve constantly, because everything is constantly changing. So the service that you may have been offering or the skill that you're the most interested in may not be the one that the world needs anymore, or something
Right.
there may be shifting. So for example, a lot of the designers that I work with come from the print world, and they're afraid of data. But there's so much that designers can do with data these days. But if they're afraid of it, they're not going to learn it, and then they're going to miss out. They're going to miss the boat. So that's an example of how to basically stay with the economy as it's changing, and just let go of whatever you thought was important and focus on what the world needs and how that intersects with what you know how to do or could learn to do.
Right. So I know you're talking about the print designers and that they're scared of data. I'm just curious, how do you suggest, when you say data, I'm not exactly sure what aspect of it you're referring to, but how do you suggest that they become, kind of, I don't know, more innovative, more future focused with the data?
Learning. It's just by learning. So I mean, the data I'm talking about, for example, variable data printing or marketing automation. How does design integrate with marketing automation, or augmented reality, or artificial intelligence, or virtual reality? All of these emerging technologies use data. But if you don't think you're a numbers person because you're a creative, or you want to be tied to the idea of being a maker and you like that human aspect, you may be left behind if that's what you're holding on to, because I think that there are ways to integrate numbers and data and technology into what you're already doing that will make you valuable to the world of the future.
Right.
And so it just really comes back to learning as much as possible.
Right. And I'm curious if you have an example of any client you've worked with that was in the print design world, or some sort of old school design world that got into, I don't know, AI or robotics or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, this one client in particular who has kind of become the go-to person for augmented reality and variable data printing, which is that personalized printing, right? Where every single thing that comes out of the printer is different for each person who's receiving it. Like, that's an amazing tool that's available, but very few print designers are actually using it because they don't know what the potential is.
Right. Right.
And so if you position yourself, you as a designer, position yourself as the one who knows how to do that, and what's the effect it will have on your clients' customers, then that opens up a whole new world that no one else is touching because they don't want to have anything to do with it.
Right. Right. Great. That was really, really fantastic. Thank you so much, Elise.
Of course.
And then finally, what's the best way for the audience to engage with you, to learn more about the work that you do, to find resources and the books that you've written and all of that?
So 2 things. One is my website, which is marketing-mentor.com, where you can sign up for my quick tips, which is always the first thing that I suggest people do. But there are lots of free resources there also. And I have an online store where I sell marketing tools that can help you build your business. And then I did pull together some free resources for this audience, and you can find them at gettalk.at. the word AT/competence. And we can put that URL wherever people are going to be able to find it.
Great. Thank you so much, Elise. That was really wonderful.
Of course. My pleasure. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you. And thank you all for watching. Please stay tuned for more. And I hope that you will incorporate these learnings from this interview into your day-to-day life and into your career, to your creative career. Thank you so much. Bye.